Okay, sorry my computer died. Had to restart. This is the second video. So, depending on Mariah's individual physical state when she comes over, I could possibly have to do a little more coaxing to get her to be comfortable with me and with the recipe, or be a little more hands-off if she's kind of feeling like, stay away. I'm crossing my fingers that she comes really hungry so that she'll definitely have some intrinsic motivation for what we're doing. Food is one the base of Maslow's hierarchy of needs pyramid in the, I believe, physiological state. So creating intrinsic motivation based off of that shouldn't be too hard. I am also going to continue to try and encourage intrinsic motivation by only participating in the cooking either as much as she wants or as little as she wants, and provide extrinsic motivation in the form of words of encouragement or help as necessary. I'm hoping that if she decides that she doesn't want a whole lot of help while she's cooking, that it doesn't end up with her feeling some learned helplessness, that whether or not she's used to having more help when she's cooking, or if she's used to being the helper when she's cooking. Or another problem that could arise with that is if she's not able to self-regulate to be able to be cooking, cooking the pasta sauce and cooking the pasta and checking the garlic bread all at the same time. I'm going to try, before we start cooking, I'll also try and determine what her schema is regarding homemade pasta sauce by testing her long-term memory, recalling other times she's made pasta sauce from scratch. This will also allow me to determine if she has any misconceptions, whether overgeneralizations or undergeneralizations, regarding how difficult or easy it is to make a sauce from scratch, or what the process involves and what it is. Going hand in hand with that, this could also allow me to test her personal theory regarding how homemade pasta sauce is created by asking questions about the other times that she has cooked pasta, or, well, honestly, any other type of food, really, to see where she's at with her cooking abilities. A potential personal fable that could be challenged during a lesson is that pasta sauce only comes out of a can or is only made in a pan on the stove, which of course won't be true in this case, because part of the recipe calls for putting some of the materials for the sauce in a blender. Mariah's going to have to use accommodation to adjust her schema regarding how pasta sauce is made if she doesn't know that you can in fact use a blender besides making smoothies. And I'm hoping that her previous cooking experiences will positively transfer to help her as we're making this new recipe that she hasn't seen before. In regards to mastery learning, Mariah is going to need to know some basic cooking skills, such as how to dice and how to saute, in order to follow the recipe. And if she does not, then I will teach her as necessary, depending on what she doesn't know and what she knows. To kind of help build a little bit for her while she's cooking, I'm going to share some positive and negative instances about it. So I guess a positive instance would be comparing the sauce that we make to a marinara or a spaghetti sauce, and then a negative instance in the lesson would be to compare the sauce to a pasta salad. With that, I will also share some defining characteristics for this specific sauce recipe, which include using the blender to finely chop the sauteed vegetables, and correlational characteristics between this recipe and other recipes that she's followed that I am able to find out from what she shares with me. Since it's winter, the physical climate of my apartment will need to be warm, not only to keep anyone from getting distracted because of being too cold, but also to encourage her to be more comfortable in a stranger's apartment that she's never been to before and with someone she doesn't know very well. Something I've noticed that occasionally works to make people feel more at ease is to mirror their actions, which also could be called could be put in the scale of contagious behaviors. So I'm going to try and test it out to see if kind of reacting to her the same way that she's reacting to me, but if it's negative, in a little more positive way, to help see if that can make her more comfortable, in addition to having a welcoming environment. Before we start cooking, I will help her set up the kitchen in a way that's easy for her to move from one station to the next, which is the physical arrangement. I'll show her prototypes of anything that she doesn't need to know such as if she doesn't know how to dice a vegetable or to saute, I'll show her how to do that, and then, of course, depending on how involved she wants me to be, go from there. Even though I don't have pictures for reference of other times that we've made the sauce, I'm hoping that by encouraging her to visualize what the end results look like, that she can kind of build a little bit of her own schema for this particular recipe. When we're finished cooking, she's going to use her sensory register, which is part of the simplified memory system, to determine if the recipe has been completed and followed in a way that has produced a sauce and some food that tastes good. Technically, the lesson could be considered experimental research because Mariah's going to have to decide whether the ingredients and the process will produce a result that she likes. And her emotional response and her affective domain should be pretty limited since it isn't a very stressful lesson and won't require a very wide range of reactions. If she chose, she could use a copy of the recipe as a mnemonic device to take home with her to memorize how to make it in the future if she wants. And then to follow with that, decay won't be a problem during our lesson as everything we need to make the food will be written down. But I will, again, send her with a copy if she wants it and if she likes it. As mentioned previously, there shouldn't be a whole lot of emotions involved in our lessons, so she won't likely have a lot of cognition unless she's responding to any sort of conversation that we have. Some possible emotions probably are going to be nerves a little bit and some uncertainty because she won't know me, she won't know the recipe, so it'll be a new environment. Because she's in middle school, and I believe she's around 12, she's right in the middle of two of Piaget's cognitive stages, which are the concrete operational and formal operational. The concrete operational stage means that she can think logically about concrete objects and add and subtract, and the formal operational stage means that she's kind of starting to reason abstractly and think in hypothetical terms. So switching gears, it's a possible test for social development and where she is in regards to Erik Erikson's psychosocial stages. I could ask her how this lesson could benefit or be used in the future. So, for example, being able to use this recipe to cook for other people or teach other people to cook, like when she's in college. Or also even at home for her family to kind of give you or your Sister Wilson a night off from cooking. I think that both classical and operant conditioning will play a part in the lesson. Classical because sounds like a timer will probably elicit a response, such as her salivating a little bit or having her stomach rumble because we're so used to, when that timer goes off in the kitchen, that means dinner's ready. Operant conditioning because the good consequence of the process is going to be being able to eat when we are finished, which will encourage her to focus on the process. As a part of operant conditioning, reinforcement will be present in the lesson by being able to taste test the food as we're moving along to make sure we're following right and that it's coming together as it's supposed to. And because of her age, she should be developed into the final stage of, I believe it's pronounced Jerome Bruner's theory, which is known as the symbolic stage. This is a stage where language really plays a big role, and it's a very flexible environment as she's growing and learning. And then with that, even though she's really young, she should be able to kind of work her way and understand most of the levels in Carol Gilligan's Ethics of Care. Being in middle school, however, means that she'll be working on her social acceptance and learning to rely on others because it's kind of that awkward stage for everyone where they're learning who they are and growing up. I'm not going to be trying to teach her anything that requires a major reaction or a response, so I don't think we'll have a problem with extinction during the lesson. Discovery learning won't play a big part in our lesson either because the most problem solving that she's going to have to do will be self-regulating to be able to cook more than one food item at a time. Behaviorism, which relies on the idea that behaviors are learned through reinforcement, won't be a big player in the lesson beyond the desire to follow the recipe to have that good finished result. Bloom's taxonomy will kind of underlie the entire lesson as we work to follow the recipe. She's going to work to reproduce the recipe, carry out the instructions from it, compare it to what she already knows, and then evaluate how the overall process went, how she feels about the overall end result, which, of course, is a part of developing her psychomotor domain. As Mariah works to follow the recipe and complete each part of making the sauce, her cognitive domain, which involves learning and applying knowledge, will get to kind of stretch its legs a little bit. Albert Bandura's social learning theory, that learning can occur through observation or direct instruction, will be important in this lesson as well, as I help her follow the recipe. Again, going back to how involved I am with that and how involved she wants me to be. So Vygotsky's theory of social development, which is also a foundation of constructivism, will be incorporated into the lesson because Mariah will be developing how she interacts with someone she doesn't know and also working on her zone of proximal development. So what's happening in her brain during the lesson? So her neocortex, which is involved in brain functions such as sensory perception and generation of motor commands, is going to be busy working to keep her moving and cooking and doing all these different actions that are needed to finish this recipe. The neocortex works with the thalamus to manage the smells and the taste input from cooking. One of the more active structures in her brain is going to be her brainstem, as it's passing commands from the different parts of her brain down to the rest of her body. The cerebrum is the largest part of the brain and is in charge of higher functions such as thought and action, and that'll help keep her focused and organized and working forward. Her cerebellum will be working away, trying to control her muscle movement while she moves around. Mariah's frontal lobe will be working to sort through the directions on the recipe and any verbal directions that I personally give her. Any emotions such as frustration or excitement or anxiety will also be controlled by her frontal lobe. So her temporal lobe, which is in charge of controlling auditory stimuli, will be trying to sort through all the different things that she's hearing, such as the timer, or if my roommates are home, if there's a distraction from that, or any directions that I give her. The occipital lobe is going to be working to process the different tasks that Mariah's going to have to keep an eye on while she's cooking, it ties into visual processing. Her parietal lobe is going to also be another one of those really big active players during the lesson as she's following the recipe to make the sauce. Her motor cortex is going to be passing along instructions that are going to propel her to participate in the cooking process. And the limbic system, which is in charge of emotions and motivations. With this part, I'm really hoping that while we're cooking, it's going to be working to fuel her intrinsic motivation. Her sensory register system, which is managed by her thalamus. Sight, sound, smell, taste, touch, all of these are going to pass through here to be processed. And the three that are going to be the most prominent in the lesson are going to be sight, taste, and smell. Because the hypothalamus is in charge of managing hormones, primarily to remain in homeostasis, she's most likely going to be having a little bit of a shift in the balance during our lesson due to nerves or uncertainty until she's more comfortable. If she likes the recipe, her hippocampus will be working to convert it from short-term memory to long-term memory. Another part of the limbic system, the amygdala, is going to be working on processing any of those emotional reactions that she has during the lessons and the decisions that she makes. So her neurons, which work throughout her entire brain, are going to be probably the busiest little bodies of all during this, as they're working to transmit her decisions, her emotions, and all the sensory input that she's going to be receiving through her brain during the lesson. Each little part of the neurons, such as the axons and the myelin sheath, are going to be working to also help send and receive and process those signals that her brain is receiving and sending out. Glial cells are going to act as a sort of insulation, so while her neurons are firing, the glial cells are going to be working to provide the support they need to keep working. because she's still really young and she's growing and learning, her brain is going to be shifting. She's going to have a lot of shifts in her brain in and out of this state of plasticity. So while she's working, as she's getting to this rhythm of cooking, myelination in her brain should have an increase as the process becomes more familiar. So with that, there were a few concepts that I wasn't sure that they would fit in the lesson or just didn't really fit. So those were intuition, which is it's the word for subconscious or gut instinct, the spidey sense as we called it in class. It kind of guides a person's actions. Another thing was descriptive research. Descriptive research focuses primarily on characteristics of a population or a subject, and so since we're cooking a recipe and we're not really studying a group or anything, she's not going to be needing to use this in this specific lesson. Correlational research is another one that won't really play a big part. It focuses on the relationship between two or more variables. I guess you could say that because we are mixing so many different ingredients that she may not have a whole lot of experience with, it'll be a little bit of correlational research because she's trying to figure out how they're going to work together. Intermittent reinforcement. It's a reinforcement that encourages a behavior, but it doesn't happen every single time the desired behavior or response occurs. So because, again, we're just cooking, it's not going to have a big role in the lesson. And since there's no competition for this, or there's not going to be a test later, norm and criterion reference tests also won't be involved. And then I am still trying to work on how to fit the De Bono 6 thinking hats or the parallel thinking into it. I know there's a way. I just need to find it. And then last, the attribution theory, which is defined as how people explain the causes of behaviors and events, is also not going to be a big part. So those are the concepts, and that is my lesson plan. And I look forward to teaching Mariah on Saturday.